In the summer of 1949, a young man in Asheville, North Carolina, sat on the porch of a girl he had met at church for 14 consecutive Sunday evenings before he ever held her hand. They were married for 63 years. He once told his grandson that the entire marriage was built in those 14 evenings, not in the wedding, not in the honeymoon, on the porch. There were rules to those evenings. Rules her father expected, rules he had been taught by his own father. None of them were written down. The man died in 2014. His grandson asked him once what the rules had been. The old man said, "You did not learn them by being told. You learned them by being watched." They did not call it dating, they called it courting. A word so old now that most Americans under 40 have never heard it spoken in earnest. Every gesture had a weight. Every visit had a witness. Every evening on a wooden porch in front of a closed screen door had been engineered over 4 or 5 generations to make two young people choose each other slowly enough to know what they were choosing. Then the cars got faster. The drive-ins opened, the phone moved into the bedroom. We decided the porch was old-fashioned. We decided the rules were repressive. We replaced 63-year marriages with APPS that promised love in an afternoon, and we have been wondering ever since why no one stays. Number 22 on this list took less than 90 seconds and told a father everything he needed to know about whether the young man on his porch was serious. Number 16 directly contradicted every piece of modern dating advice and produced more lasting marriages in working-class America than any single courting behavior ever measured. And number 3, the rule that mothers before 1965 enforced more strictly than any other, is now being quietly rediscovered by relationship therapists who do not know they are teaching what every grandmother already knew. These 25 rules were not about being chaste. They were not about being repressed. They were about being patient enough to find out who the other person actually was before deciding to spend a life beside them. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 forgotten front porch courtship rules every American couple followed before 1965. Number 25. The Sunday-only visit. A young man called on a young woman on Sunday evenings. Not Friday, not Saturday, Sunday, after church, after dinner, before dark. For a mill worker's son in 1951, Greenville, South Carolina. Courting a girl from the next street over, the Sunday rule was the entire pace of the romance. He saw her once a week. He thought about her the other 6 days. The visit was rare on purpose. Rarity was the whole engine. Textile mill towns across the Carolinas held to the Sunday rule so firmly that local pastors built their evening services around it. The week did the work, the evening could not. Number 24. Arrive with flowers picked, not bought. A bouquet from the florist meant a young man had money. A bouquet from the roadside meant he had paid attention. For a farmhand in 1948 outside Lexington, Kentucky, walking 3 miles to a Sunday visit, the wildflowers in his hand had been chosen one at a time on the walk. The girl's mother saw them first. She put them in water without a word. In rural Appalachia, the picked bouquet was so universal that florists in small towns did not sell flowers on Sundays at all until the 1960s. The mother had been told everything she needed to know. He had not bought her daughter. He had thought about her. Number 23. Greet the father before the girl. When the young man stepped onto the porch, his first words went to her father, always. Never the daughter first. For a junior bank clerk in 1953 in Roanoke, Virginia, visiting a girl whose father owned a hardware store, the greeting to the father was the lesson his uncle had drilled into him at 15. The father nodded, and only then could the daughter be spoken to. This was the strictest rule in the Scotch-Irish hill country, where a young man who skipped the father had announced himself a fool before he had said 3 words. The father saw it before the daughter did. Number 22. The 90-second standing conversation. Before anyone sat down, the young man stood on the porch and made small conversation with the father for 90 seconds. The weather, the crops, the Sunday sermon. For a returning Korean War veteran in 1954 calling on a girl in Birmingham, Alabama, those 90 seconds were the entire vetting. The father learned whether the young man could hold a conversation, hold his eyes, and hold his shoulders straight. The mother heard everything from inside the screen door. The daughter waited. The standing conversation said more about the young man than any letter he could ever write. Number 21. Sit where you were told to sit. The porch had a young man's chair and a young woman's chair, and they were never the same chair, and they were never side by side. For a tobacco buyer's son in 1950, in Durham, North Carolina, sitting on a porch for the first time with a girl he had been thinking about for 3 months, the chairs were 3 feet apart. They were never moved. In Quaker and Methodist households across the Upper South, the 3-foot distance was so standard that porch furniture was actually built in matched pairs for the purpose. The distance was the whole architecture, close enough to hear each other, far enough that nothing could be claimed that had not been earned. Number 20. The door stays open. The screen door to the front room stayed propped open for the entire visit. The mother walked past it 3 times an hour. The father read his paper in the front room with the lamp on. For a railroad brakeman's son in 1949, Macon, Georgia, visiting his future wife for the first dozen Sundays, the open door was not surveillance. It was protection. It protected him from himself. It protected her from a moment she would have regretted. The door said the family was still inside the romance, and the romance was better for it. Number 19. Bring something for the mother. A jar of preserves, a piece of fruit, a note in your hand. Never empty-handed. For a teacher's son in 1955 in Charleston, West Virginia, calling on a coal foreman's daughter, the half-pound of butter wrapped in wax paper was worth more than any compliment he could have spoken. The mother set it on the kitchen counter. The mother decided that night that he could come back. In Appalachian mining towns, the rule was so absolute that a young man who arrived empty-handed was often turned around at the porch step without explanation. Daughters chose husbands. Mothers approved of them. The young man who forgot the mother was the young man who courted alone. Number 18. Speak of your people first. Before the young man spoke of himself, he spoke of his family, his father's trade, his mother's people, his grandfather's town. For a Welsh coal miner's grandson in 1952, Scranton, Pennsylvania, sitting across from a girl whose grandfather had come from the same valley, the genealogy was the entire foundation. 2 families recognized each other across 2 generations in 15 minutes. The girl's father set down his paper and joined the porch. The romance was now community business. Number 17. The hour before dark. The Sunday visit ended when the streetlights came on. Not before, not after. For a young Methodist preacher's son in 1951, Athens, Georgia, the dusk was the entire clock. He left when the light left. He did not need to be told. The dusk said the visit had been the right length. A young man who lingered past dark had asked for something he had not earned. A young man who left at dusk had said he would be back next Sunday, and the next, and the next. Here is what nobody wants to admit about American courtship before 1965. The divorce rate in 1950 was 26%. The divorce rate today is closer to 50%. Couples who courted under the old porch rules and married before 1965 stayed married at rates we have not matched since. We tell ourselves it was because women had no options. The data does not support us. Working women in 1955 had more economic agency than most Americans now remember. They stayed because they had chosen carefully. They had chosen carefully because the system forced them to. 14. Sunday evenings on a porch with the screen door open and a father turning the pages of a newspaper in the next room is a more rigorous compatibility test than any algorithm Silicon Valley has built. We did not improve on the porch. We replaced it with a phone, and the phone never once asked a young man to take off his hat at the doorway. Number 16, ask 3 questions before you speak about yourself. The young man arrived with 3 questions ready. About her week, about her family, about her thoughts on a small thing. For a junior accountant in 1953, Cincinnati, Ohio, courting a Sunday school teacher, the 3 questions were the entire opening. He listened to every answer. He did not interrupt. He did not pivot to his own story. The girl went inside that night and told her mother that he had asked about her and meant it. The mother said, "Keep him. He came back for 41 years. Number 15, compliment the house, not the girl. The first compliment of the evening went to the home, the porch, the flowers in the yard, the smell from the kitchen. Never the girl, not yet. For a salesman's son in 1956, Topeka, Kansas, the compliment to the wisteria climbing the porch column was the only compliment given that first Sunday. The mother heard it. The girl heard it. The girl understood that the young man knew where she had come from before he had decided who she was. Midwestern farm families enforced this rule more strictly than almost anyone, because in those communities the house was the family's standing, and to praise it was to honor 3 generations at once. The compliment to the house was the compliment to her, paid through the only address that mattered. Number 14, hold the glass with 2 hands. When the mother brought sweet tea or lemonade onto the porch, the young man stood up. He thanked her. He took the glass with 2 hands. For a hardware clerk's son in 1950 in Knoxville, Tennessee, the reception of a single glass of tea with both hands was the lesson his grandmother had given him when he was 12. The mother saw the gesture and softened. He had been raised by someone. Somewhere, a woman had taught him that a glass of tea on a Sunday afternoon was not nothing. It was the small kindness of the house. It deserved to be received like a gift. Number 13, never speak ill of anyone. Not the boy at school, not the neighbor down the road, not the politician on the radio. The porch was no place for sharp tongues. For a furniture maker's son in 1954 in High Point, North Carolina, the rule was iron. The father on the other side of the screen door was listening. A young man who spoke meanly about anyone, even in passing, was a young man who would one day speak meanly about the daughter. Fathers knew this in 1954. They have been writing books about it ever since. Number 12, stand. When she sits, stand when she stands. A young man on a porch rose when the young woman rose, every time. For a Sunday school superintendent's nephew in Jackson, Mississippi in 1951, the rule was so deeply ingrained that he did it for 68 years afterward, every time his wife stood from a table. He had not been told to do it that long. He had simply never been told to stop. The standing was the whole architecture of respect. A man who stood for a woman had announced that her movement mattered to him. A man who stayed seated had announced that it did not. Number 11, bring news, not gossip. The young man came to the porch with one piece of news, something he had read, something his uncle had told him. something from the world beyond the street. For a hardware buyer in Lynchburg, Virginia in 1955, the small piece of news was the offering. It was not about him. It was a gift he had brought from the wider world to a porch that did not always see it. In small-town America, before television became universal, the visiting young man was often the family's main source of outside news on a Sunday evening, and the discipline of bringing one good item was treated as seriously as bringing the flowers. The father listened. The conversation rose. The young man had brought something more valuable than flowers. He had brought a reason to stay another hour. Number 10. The walking visit. After 3 or 4 Sunday porches, the father permitted a walk. To the corner, to the end of the block. Never further. For a young pharmacist's apprentice in 1952 in Chattanooga, Tennessee, the first walk was 300 yards down a sidewalk in full view of every neighbor on the street. They did not hold hands. They walked beside each other at the pace of a Sunday afternoon. The whole block was the chaperone. The whole block also remembered them 50 years later as the young couple who had walked properly. Number 9. The letter between visits. Between Sundays, the young man wrote, one letter mailed Tuesday. It arrived Thursday. The mother read it before the daughter ever saw it. For a junior pastor's son in 1953, Spartanburg, South Carolina, the weekly letter was the entire weekday courtship. He chose his sentences carefully because someone else would read them first. The discipline made him a better writer and a better man. The letter said he had been thinking. The letter said the daughter was worth ink and paper and the slowness of the mail. We have replaced the letter with a text message and called it progress. In 2017, a sociologist at the University of Virginia published a study comparing marital satisfaction across 3 American cohorts. Couples married before 1965, couples married between 1980 and 2000, couples married after 2010. The pre-1965 cohort reported higher long-term satisfaction by margins the researchers had not expected. The variable that explained the gap was not religion, it was not economics, it was not gender roles, it was the average number of weeks between meeting and marrying, and the average number of times the future spouse had been in the family home before the engagement. The slower courtships produced the stronger marriages. The research was published. Almost no one read it. We had already decided the old way was wrong, and we were not going to be told otherwise by data. Number 8. Ask the father before you ask the daughter. When the young man decided to propose, he spoke to the father first, privately, plainly. For a returning veteran in 1956, Mobile, Alabama, the conversation with the father lasted 11 minutes on a back porch with 2 glasses of iced tea. The father said yes. The young man asked the daughter the following Sunday. She said yes, too. She had already known. The father had not told her. He had simply softened toward the young man over the previous 6 months, and she had read the softening. The asking of the father was not permission. It was the recognition that a marriage joined 2 families, and the father deserved to hear it first from the man who was joining them. Number 7. The promise made in daylight. Serious words between a young man and a young woman were spoken in daylight, on the porch, not in a car, not in the dark. For a young engineer in 1954, Greensboro, North Carolina. The promise that he would wait for her through 2 more years of nursing school was made on a Sunday afternoon in full sun. She remembered the light for the rest of her life. A promise made in the dark was a promise that could be taken back. A promise made in daylight had been witnessed by everything that could see it. Number 6. Wear the suit you cannot afford. A young man on a Sunday porch wore his best shirt, his only tie, and the shoes he had polished the night before with his father's brush. For a steel mill foreman's son in 1950, Gary, Indiana, the white shirt had been ironed by his own mother that morning. The effort was the whole declaration. In Midwestern industrial towns, where most young men owned one good shirt and one good pair of shoes, the Sunday outfit was almost a uniform. A young man who arrived in working clothes had announced the visit did not matter to him. The shirt said the visit was worth the trouble, and the trouble said the girl was worth the visit. Number 5, remember every name she mentions. When the young woman spoke of her sister, her cousin, her best friend from school, the young man committed each name to memory. He used them the next Sunday. For a young insurance adjuster in 1957, Wichita, Kansas, the recall of the names was the whole second visit. The girl realized he had listened. She had been heard. A man who remembered the names of the people she loved had announced he was paying attention to her life, not waiting his turn to speak about his own. She married him in 1959. He remembered all 23 names at the wedding. Number 4, leave something behind on purpose. A book, a glove, a handkerchief, always small, always honest. For a Sunday school teacher's son, in 1953 in Augusta, Georgia, the slim volume of poems left on the porch swing was the lesson his older brother had taught him. The next Sunday, he came back for it. The conversation had a reason. The mother smiled in the kitchen. The forgotten book was not forgotten. It was a bridge from this Sunday to the next, built quietly, and it never needed to be explained. Number 3, do not touch her until her father has seen you 12 times. No hand-holding, no arm offered, no casual contact of any kind until the father had watched the young man on his porch through 12 Sunday evenings. For the young man in Asheville in 1949, the rule formed the whole structure of the first 3 months. He did not hold her hand until the 14th visit. He held it then on the porch swing in daylight, with her mother visible through the kitchen window. They were married for 63 years. The waiting had not been deprivation. The waiting had been the foundation. Modern relationship therapists are now quietly recommending what they call delayed physical intimacy. Every grandmother in 1949 could have saved them the research. Number 2, the walk to the gate. At the end of every visit, the father walked the young man to the gate at the edge of the yard. Not the porch, the gate. They spoke for 2 minutes about nothing in particular. The young man said thank you. The father nodded. The young man walked home. For a textile worker's son in 1955, Spartanburg, South Carolina, the walk to the gate was the only private conversation he ever had with his future father-in-law before the engagement. 2 minutes every Sunday for 7 months. By the time he asked for the daughter's hand, the 2 men had spent almost an hour alone together in 2-minute installments. They had built a relationship the daughter never saw. That relationship held the marriage steady for the next 51 years. Number 1, come back next Sunday. That is all. When the visit was over, when the dusk had come, when the streetlights had flickered on, the young man stood up, said thank you, walked to the gate, and came back the following Sunday, and the Sunday after, and the Sunday after that, for 14 weeks, for 20, for as long as it took. For a young man in 1949 in Asheville, the rule was the only rule that mattered in the end. Showing up every Sunday with clean shoes and 3 questions and 1 piece of news and a small thing for the mother. The girl was not won in a moment. She was won in repetition. She was won by the slow accumulation of one decent Sunday after another until the question of marriage was no longer a question. It was the obvious next sentence in a paragraph two people had been writing together for half a year. None of this required money. None of it required a car. None of it required a single dollar spent on instruction. It required a father in a front room with a newspaper. It required a mother walking past the screen door 3 times an hour. It required a porch, 2 chairs 3 feet apart, and the willingness of 2 young people to sit in them until they knew what they were doing. The 14 Sundays in Asheville were not romance. They were construction. 2 people building in plain daylight with witnesses on every side, the slow foundation of a thing that would have to hold for 63 years. We tore down the porch. We sent the father out of the room. We told the young people to go figure it out in the dark, in a car, on a phone, on an app. And then we were surprised when nothing held. The porch is still there. The screen door still opens. The only thing missing is the young man at the gate who used to stand and wait to be invited up.